Before we begin, I want to give a huge shout out to this video's sponsor, LD Player. LD Player is a free Android emulator that you can use to play all of your favorite mobile games on PC, including FGO. In fact, FGO's performance on LD Player is consistently smooth, and you can even run multiple instances of the game simultaneously if you want to farm multiple accounts. So if you're interested, check out the link to the LD Player website in the description or pinned comment down below and download it today. Now, onto the spotlight. It just wouldn't be a good event unless there was a limited 3-star servant. Hello everyone, Sobroni of G&A Reviews here with a servant spotlight for one of the leaders of the Chengang Super Friend Club, Mori Nagayoshi. We'll be examining his stats and skills, as well as going over pointers on how to utilize him effectively and an overall grade, comparing him to how he stacks up to the other 3-star servants. So if you're ready to get wild in the Sengoku era, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and ring my bell so you catch all of these spotlight videos as they go up, and you can help out the channel. But now, onto Mori's stats. Mori has a max HP of 8,019 and a max attack of 7,732, which becomes 8,505 due to his Berserker class modifier. As a 3-star Berserker, Mori has the second highest attack stat, but the lowest HP. Compared to the rest of the 3-star servants overall, he maintains one of the highest attack stats in his rarity, but again is among the lowest when it comes to HP. When it comes to his command cards, Mori has 3 hits on his quick card, 3 hits on his arts, 2 hits on his buster, and 5 hits on his extra card. He has an NP gain rate of 0.5% and a star rate of 4.9%. Mori's stats fall perfectly in line with the typical glass cannon Berserker. Grossly high attack with minuscule HP. He has decent NP gain for his class due to his double arts card deck, but his star generating is fairly low because of only having 1 quick card. Taking a look at his skills, Mori's first skill is Mental Pollution Wicked rank B. It increases his own crit damage for 3 turns between 50 and 100% depending on level, and it also increases his debuff resist by 100% for 3 turns. But as a demerit, it does reduce his own buff success rate by 100% for 3 turns. His second skill is Blood-Soaked Recklessness, rank A. It grants him an on-hit attack buff that increases his attack between 10 to 15% depending on level, up to 3 times. But it also reduces his defense by 10% up to 3 times as a demerit. And finally, his last skill is Demon Musashi's Will, rank C. It increases his own crit star absorption for 1 turn between 3,000 and 5,000% depending on level, and it also grants him an on-death buff that generates 20 crit stars when he dies. As for his passives, he only has 1, and that's Madness Enhancement rank D, which increases his buster card effectiveness by 4%. Moving on to his deck and Noble Phantasm, Mori has a Buster Arts deck with Quick Arts Arts Buster Buster and a Buster Noble Phantasm. His Noble Phantasm is Ningen Mukotsu. It grants him Ignore Invincibility for 1 turn, and then deals damage to a single enemy that ignores defense with between a 600 and 1000% damage modifier depending on level, and it also reduces their defense for 3 turns between 10 to 30% depending on overcharge. As expected of a Berserker, Mori is very fond of bones, so he'll need quite a few for his ascension. For leveling, he'll need 15 Heroes Proof, 20 Evil Bones, 11 Octuplet Crystals, and 5 Chaos Talons. Heroes Proof are best farmed at the pirate ship in Okeanis, where they have a 58% drop rate. Evil Bones can be farmed at Coordinate XG in Fuyuki, where they have a 64% drop rate, or at Coordinate XC for better AP efficiency, but lower rates. Octuplet Crystals drop at the Peach Blossom Shangri-La in Agartha with a 40% drop rate, and Chaos Talons have a 20% drop rate at Des Moines in America. For skill ascension, Mori requires 30 bones, 30 Heroes Proof, 16 Magatamas, and 7 wines per skill. Magatamas drop at the Castle Town in Shimosa with a 40% drop rate, and Divine Wine has a 12% drop rate at the Palace of the Dragon King in Agartha. Berserkers are not known for being the most versatile class in FGO. In fact, they are infamously inflexible and usually just go all in on offense. And Mori takes this concept to the next level. What if instead of having low defense, we have no defense? And to be honest, that isn't necessarily a bad strategy for a Berserker. As is the case with most Berserkers, Mori has stats that are sharply skewed towards offense. with incredibly high attack for his rarity, but the second lowest total HP, although his Noble Phantasm gain is notably better than most other Berserkers due to his double arch card deck. Unfortunately, his star generating and his passives are on the weaker side though. His madness enhancement in particular is especially low. To summarize Mori's unique playstyle, he's all about causing as much chaos as he can, and then embracing death as quickly as possible. And if you think that's me being hyperbolic, let's take a closer look at his skills. His first skill, Mental Pollution, grants him a massive 100% buff to crit damage and debuff resistance for 3 turns. But as a demerit, it also completely locks him out of any further buffs for 3 turns after the skill is activated. There is a lot to talk about with this skill. Firstly, let's focus on the positives. This is the centerpiece to Mori's entire kit. A 3-turn 100% crit buff is unmatched. Most other crit buffs that even reach 100% only last a single turn. And on top of that, Mori is a Berserker who already hits way above his weight class. So with this additional damage, you can bet that his buster crits can reach ludicrously high levels. The debuff resistance also means that Mori is almost completely immune to debuffs for 3 turns, so there's no need to worry about him being stunned or weakened. But on the downside, the demerit is significant. It prevents all buffs from working on Mori. That includes buffs like Invincibility Pierce from his own Noble Phantasm, as well as stuff like Evade, Defense Up, or Invincibility. So supports are completely useless to Mori once he activates this skill. He has no way of being protected or buffed. And since this demerit is applied as a buff, he can't even dodge it with CEs like Vessel of the Saint or debuff removal. So this skill should always be the last one used in his turn. His second skill, Blood-Soaked Recklessness, applies an on-hit effect to all of his attacks that increases his attack by 15%, up to 3 times, but it also lowers his defense by up to 30%. This means that at max stacks, Mori can get a significant 45% buff to attack, which is comparable to a Mana Burst, and it can be achieved in a single Brave Chain. However, that 30% defense down, combined with his already low HP, means that he is prone to being one-shotted easily. It is worth noting that so long as you activate this skill before Mental Pollution, Mori will still gain attack buffs from attacking even while Mental Pollution is active. Finally, Mori's last skill is Demon Musashi's Will. It gives him a 5000% buff to Star Absorb, and it gives him an on-death effect that grants 20 stars to the party once he dies. The Star Absorb is large enough to nearly guarantee that Mori crits if you can get 20 or more stars in a turn, so it's excellent for setting up his first skill. But unfortunately, it only lasts for a single turn, not 3. So Mori will have issues critting for the remaining 2 turns of his Mental Pollution buff. The on-death effect just reinforces Mori's will to die quickly, and it gives a nice boon of stars for setting up the servant who replaces him. It's basically a free golden carp, which is nice. Skill leveling priority for Mori should be Mental Pollution first for the incredible crit buff, followed by his attack buff second for more damage, and then his Star Absorb last. Mori's Noble Phantasm is a single target buster attack that ignores defense, pierces invincibility, and lowers enemy defense. Invincibility pierce and defense ignoring are always great, especially on a Berserker. It means that pretty much no enemy can avoid his NP, and given Mori's 45% buff to attack, his NP can hit pretty hard. However, as I mentioned before, be wary of using this NP while Mental Pollution is active, since it will block that Invincibility Pierce buff. As you can see, Mori is all about pumping out as much damage as he can in 3 turns, and then dying. All of his skills either make it easier for him to die, or give him bonuses on death to incentivize it. But to compensate, Mori also has some hugely overpowered buffs, which enable him to hit as hard as a 4-star or even 5-star Berserker would. If you feed him crit stars, he can be an absolute beast. And even on death, he can be useful for setting up the servant that replaces him with a nice little star bomb. The issues with him though are self-evident. He is extremely fragile and there is almost no way of protecting him. And sometimes he dies immediately before he can even get most of his damage out. He also only really works well in hyper-specific team comps made specifically to exploit his gimmick. So he's even less flexible than the average Berserker. And unless you have a very strong and specific strategy in mind, he is usually not practical to use outside of meme teams or for some self-imposed challenges. Team comp for Mori is rigid. Like I said, he only works with very specific setups. He needs someone who can provide him stars, crit buffs, and huge buster buffs that he's able to take advantage of in a short time frame. So servants like Changong, Mozart, and Brynhilda are some excellent supports who can work with Mori's playstyle. Changong is perfect since he can provide Mori with a gigantic 50% mana burst and additional 100% crit buff to really pump his single turn burst damage up. And then he can even yeet him on turn 3 with his Noble Phantasm so that he can get some crit stars from Mori's death effect. Mozart is simply useful for his Star Bomb skill since it guarantees immediate crits from Mori, while Brynhilda can be useful for buffing his crit damage and his Star Absorb for 3 turns. That way he can maximize his damage over the course of his mental pollution buff. Mori's Bond CE is fittingly his will. It increases the party's buster card effectiveness by 10% and their crit damage by 15%. Not really worth using, especially since he dies so fast. Instead, give Mori craft essences that bolster his buster and crit damage, like Knight's Pride, Victor from the Moon, Joint Recital, and Starry Nights. In the future, one craft essence that works exceedingly well with Mori is Like a Bird. It's a free CE that we get next year, which buffs both crit damage and buster crit damage. As for command codes, as you can guess, go for anything that buffs buster crit damage, so a command code like Mistress of Heaven is very good. Overall, Mori is one of the most hyper-specialized servants that we've possibly ever seen in FGO. He is designed to do one job, and his viability largely depends on how much you can support him in that job. When given the proper support, Mori can far exceed the normal damage levels of his rarity. He can be used to set up other crit servants, and he has some niche utility in his invincibility and defense ignoring NP. On the downside though, for most players, he isn't going to be very practical or consistent due to relying so heavily on card and crit RNG. His setup is incredibly specific, which makes him very inflexible, and he's not able to be slapped onto most team comps. He also has a complete lack of any defense, which will result in him dying before he can meaningfully contribute to the battle a lot of the time. So all in all, Mori gets a C from me. He does have some upside in his damage capabilities, but he can be so difficult and impractical to use that his benefits rarely show themselves. And those are my thoughts on Mori. I will say that he is a very fun servant to use, and building teams with him can be very satisfying, but unless you really love him or you love buster crit teams, he can be safely skipped. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over to our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter. And I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Soberoni out. Later.